In 1963, one of the most ambitious, most troubled, and most visually spectacular epic films ever produced arrived in theaters, carrying within it a story behind the story that was in many ways more dramatic than anything on screen. A production that nearly destroyed its director, bankrupted its studio, broke its leading man, and somehow still delivered a film of genuine grandeur that has never received the recognition it deserves. 55 Days at Peking tells the story of the Boxer Rebellion of 1900, but the real story is what happened during the making of it, and most fans have never heard any of it. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into 20 facts about one of Hollywood's most extraordinary and most overlooked epics. Fact number 1. The film was shot entirely in Spain. Despite being set in China during one of the most dramatic episodes in the history of the Qing dynasty, not a single frame of 55 Days at Peking was filmed in China or anywhere near it. The entire production, including the recreation of the legation quarter of Peking that became the film's most celebrated visual achievement. Built from scratch on locations outside Madrid, Spain, the production choosing Spain partly for its favorable climate, partly for its lower production costs, and partly because the political realities of 1961 and 1962 made filming in China entirely impossible. The Spanish locations providing a neutral canvas on which production designer Viniero Colasani and art director John Moore constructed one of the most elaborate period sets in the history of Hollywood epic filmmaking. Fact number 2. The Peking set was one of the largest ever built. The reconstruction of the legation quarter that serves as the film's primary setting was not a partial set dressed with camera angles to suggest scale, but a genuinely enormous physical construction covering approximately 4 city blocks of Spanish landscape, incorporating dozens of full-scale buildings, defensive walls, gates, and streets that required months of construction work by hundreds of craftsmen and represented a financial investment so significant that the production's budget began its catastrophic escalation before a single actor had stepped in front of a camera, and the set scale was such that Samuel Bronston, the independent producer behind the film, used photographs of it in publicity materials as proof of his production's ambition. The physical reality of what had been built in Spain being more persuasive than any written description could be. Fact number 3. Nicholas Ray's health collapsed during production. Director Nicholas Ray, whose credits included Rebel, Without a Cause, and In a Lonely Place, two of the most psychologically precise films of the 1950s, suffered a serious heart attack during the production of 55 Days at Peking that removed him from the director's chair at a critical point in the filming schedule. And the circumstances of his collapse were severe enough that the production was genuinely uncertain for a period whether it would be able to continue at all. Ray's medical crisis arriving at a moment when the film was already significantly over schedule and over budget, and the combination of a hospitalized director, an escalating budget, and a cast of international stars waiting to be used created a logistical and financial emergency that the production resolved in the most Hollywood way imaginable by quietly replacing the director and hoping nobody would notice. Fact number 4. Guy Green directed much of the film without credit when Nicholas Ray's heart attack made it impossible for him to continue directing. The production brought in British director Guy Green, a respected cinematographer and director with a solid professional reputation, to complete the film, and Green directed a substantial portion of the finished picture, including several of the most important dramatic sequences, without receiving any screen credit for his work, the official credit remaining with Ray as a professional courtesy and a contractual obligation. And the result is a film with two distinct directorial sensibilities visible within it if you know where to look: Ray's expressionist instincts and Green's more classical approach, creating occasional tonal inconsistencies that critics noticed without always being able to identify their source. Fact number 5. Charlton Heston despised making the film. Charlton Heston, who plays the American Marine officer Major Matt Lewis and carries the film's action sequences with his characteristic physical authority, was by his own subsequent account profoundly unhappy during the production of 55 Days at Peking. The combination of Nicholas Ray's deteriorating health, the logistical chaos of a production spiraling beyond its original parameters, and the particular difficulties of working on a Samuel Bronston epic where the scale of the production often seemed to exist in inverse proportion to the quality of the screenplay, producing in Heston a frustration that he expressed with characteristic directness in his published diaries, describing the experience as one of the most difficult of his career and the finished film as something considerably less than what it had promised to be when he signed on. Fact number 6. Ava Gardner's personal life devastated her performance. Ava Gardner, cast as the Russian Baroness Ivanov in a role that required her to project aristocratic composure and romantic authority, was during the production of 55 Days at Peking in the middle of one of the most personally turbulent periods of her life. Her various romantic entanglements and personal difficulties affecting her professional reliability in ways that the production found enormously challenging. Gardner arriving on set unprepared on some occasions and unavailable on others, and the performance that exists in the finished film, which has moments of genuine quality alongside moments of visible distraction, represents what could be captured from an actress who was simultaneously one of the most naturally gifted screen presences of her generation and one of the most personally complicated individuals in the history of Hollywood. Fact number 7. The film nearly bankrupted Samuel Bronston Productions. Samuel Bronston had built his independent production company on the basis of Spanish-shot epics El Cid, King of Kings, the fall of the Roman Empire that used the combination of cheap Spanish labor, favorable government arrangements, and ambitious production design to compete with the major studios on the screen while undercutting them on cost. And 55 Days at Peking was the production that demonstrated the limits of that model, its escalating budget, and its troubled production schedule consuming resources that Bronston's company could not fully absorb, and the financial damage inflicted by the film combined with the subsequent failure of the fall of the Roman Empire to bring sufficient box office return effectively ended Bronston's production operation. One of the most ambitious independent studios of the early 1960s, destroyed in part by the weight of the epic it had tried to make. Fact number 8. The battle sequences required thousands of extras. The large-scale battle sequences that give 55 Days at Peking much of its visual spectacle, the Boxer attacks on the legation quarter, the military operations inside and outside the compound walls, were staged using thousands of Spanish extras costumed and trained to represent Chinese Boxer fighters and imperial troops. The logistical challenge of managing, costuming, directing, and filming this number of people in elaborate period sequences representing one of the production's most significant practical achievements. Second Unit Director Andrew Martin coordinating battle sequences of a scale that required military-style organizational planning and that produced footage of genuine epic power that remains visually impressive by any standard more than 60 years after it was shot. Fact number 9. David Niven almost didn't take the role. David Niven, who plays the British diplomat Sir Arthur Robertson with the elegant, quietly determined authority that the role requires, was not the first choice for the part, and came to the production with reservations about the script that he expressed with the diplomatic tact his characters typically deployed, and his decision to ultimately accept the role produced one of the most interesting performances in the film. Niven bringing to Robertson a quality of civilized resilience that provides the film's moral center. Fact number 10. The film addresses real historical events with surprising accuracy for a Hollywood epic of its era, a genre not historically distinguished by its fidelity to the historical record. 55 Days at Peking engages with the actual events of the Boxer Rebellion and the Siege of the Legations with a degree of historical seriousness that distinguishes it from purely fictional adventure. The film incorporating real figures, real locations, and real events from the 55 days between June and August of 1900 when the foreign legations in Peking were besieged by Boxer forces, and while the fictional characters and dramatic liberties that Hollywood requires are present throughout. Fact number 11. The score was composed by Dmitry Tiomkin. The film's music was composed by Dmitry Tiomkin, one of the most celebrated and most prolific composers in Hollywood history, whose credits included High Noon, The Guns of Navarone, and Dial M for Murder. And Tiomkin's score for 55 Days at Peking is among the most ambitious of his career, incorporating musical motifs drawn from Chinese musical traditions into a Western orchestral framework in a way that was genuinely innovative for its period. Fact number 12. The film was a box office disappointment despite its enormous production values, its internationally recognized cast, and the genuine spectacle of its battle sequences. 55 Days at Peking failed to generate the box office return that its budget required, arriving in theaters at a moment when the appetite for large-scale historical epics was beginning to show signs of the fatigue that would eventually produce the genre's collapse in the mid-1960s. Fact number 13: the Boxer Rebellion's complexity was deliberately simplified. The actual historical complexity of the Boxer Rebellion, in which Chinese nationalism, imperial politics, foreign exploitation, and genuine popular grievance combined in ways that made the conflict's moral landscape considerably more ambiguous than a Hollywood epic could comfortably accommodate, was simplified by the film into a more conventional narrative of heroic defenders against fanatical attackers. Fact number 14: Flora Robson's Empress was a controversial casting choice. The role of the Empress Dowager Cixi, one of the most formidable political figures in Chinese history and the ultimate architect of the imperial policy that allowed the Boxer Uprising to threaten the foreign legations, was played by Flora Robson, a British actress, in casting that contemporary audiences recognized immediately as a European actor playing an Asian historical figure. Fact number 15: the film contains some of Ray's most visually inventive work despite the production chaos, despite the heart attack, despite the portions of the film directed by someone else. The sequences that Nicholas Ray completed before his medical crisis contain some of the most visually inventive work of his career, compositions of unusual beauty and psychological complexity that reflect the sensibility of a filmmaker who brought to every project a way of seeing that was entirely his own. Fact number 16: the production used real military equipment. The authenticity of the film's military sequences was enhanced by the production's use of genuine period military equipment, weapons, uniforms, artillery pieces, and military hardware sourced from collections and museums across Europe and reproduced by the production's prop department with a historical fidelity that gave the battle sequences a physical credibility that purely manufactured props could not have provided. Fact number 17: Heston and Gardner had almost no chemistry on screen. The romantic subplot between Heston's Major Lewis and Gardner's Baroness Ivanov, which the film requires to function as an emotional counterweight to the action sequences, suffered significantly from the absence of genuine chemistry between its two leads, a combination of Heston's personal unhappiness with the production, Gardner's personal difficulties during filming. Fact number 18: the film's reputation has grown significantly since release in the years since its initial release and commercial disappointment. 55 Days at Peking has undergone a gradual critical rehabilitation that has recognized in it qualities that the film's troubled production and its initial reception obscured, later critics finding in its visual ambition, its genuine historical engagement. Fact number 19: the film was one of the last great Hollywood epics. 55 Days at Peking arrived at the precise historical moment when the Hollywood epic cycle that had produced Ben-Hur, Spartacus, El Cid, and Lawrence of Arabia was beginning its terminal decline. The combination of escalating production costs, changing audience tastes. Fact number 20: Nicholas Ray never fully recovered. The heart attack that removed Nicholas Ray from the direction of 55 Days at Peking marked a turning point from which his career never recovered. The combination of his medical condition, the professional humiliation of being replaced on his own production. If this introduced you to something you need to see or reminded you of something you'd forgotten, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because we find these stories every single week, and the next one is already waiting.